Hello, wonderful children of mine. Today you're going to be learning more about the Industrial Revolution and especially cities and factories. Remember that the Industrial Revolution started about 1750 and ran about till 1900 or somewhere around there. The date's not necessarily all that important, but today this is what we're going to be talking about. We're going to start off about cities and jobs. Urbanization, as I touched on yesterday, is moving from the country to the city. Because people weren't needed in the country as much for farming, they started to move to the cities to find jobs and to support their family. So this caused big changes in the world. Cities became bigger, and that created a lot of problems within the city. These early cities, not good places to live. All right? There was no running water. You can imagine having no running water. That meant no toilets, no indoor plumbing, etc. There was no sewer system. So a lot of these people, when they went to the bathroom, they went to bathroom in chamber pots or whatever they had, and they flung it out the window into the streets, which makes for a disgusting city situation. So this no sewage system, no plumbing, had a huge and detrimental effect on early cities. This spread disease like crazy. I mean, you can imagine walking down the street and there's pee or poop being flung at you. That was going to cause diseases like cholera and things like that. People got really sick, and once a disease started in a city, it spread very rapidly because of the unsafe conditions. One big problem with pre-industrial revolution cities was there was no street lights. The cities were very dark. The architecture wasn't very good, so buildings could be angled in, and so it was dark even during the day. That caused a lot of problems, especially at night when there were no street lights, no light bulbs flicking on. It was very unsafe. You couldn't be caught out after dark. Rape, murder, all those stealing, all that stuff happened at night because you couldn't see anybody coming up on you. So basically the city shut down at night. There were taverns and things like that, and there were candle lights and things, but much less safe than they are today. Okay, so early cities were not a great place to be. Early factories were even worse. At the start of early factories, there were long sheds by running water, streams and stuff like that for power. But then eventually they moved to the cities where all the people were congregating, and as they got new power sources, that was able to happen. Early factory jobs were really, really bad. 12 to 16-hour shifts. Now you think about that today, we work 8-hour shifts. So we cut that time almost in half, or in half in some situations. So 12 to 16-hour shifts, that's a long time to be at work. We would get overtime today if we were working that long. Back then, not so much. They didn't have overtime or time and a half or double time. They had to work these 12 to 16-hour shifts or lose their job. It's a take it or leave it situation. There were no safety devices at these jobs. So if you got hurt, sick, injured, you just lost your job. There was somebody else willing to take your place because jobs were hard to come by, and they didn't care. They really didn't care. You weren't getting 12 sick days a year so you could come back to work. You weren't getting maternity leave. If you were sick, injured, pregnant, whatever, you just lost your job. There was no repercussions for the factory owner. They loved to hire women. Women could be bossed around very easily. They were paid less, just like they are today, but more significantly back then. You didn't have to pay them very much, and most of those were in tough situations where they had to have a job, so they were pretty much screwed. They were harassed. They were beaten, sometimes sexually abused, and they really couldn't do anything about it. There were no complaint boards to complain to. And if they needed a job and the boss said, hey, you're going to do this, a lot of times they did. So some of these bosses were real scumbags and took advantage of women because they needed a job. Women still were in charge of the house stuff. They still had to go home and take care of the kids and put the meals on the table for their husbands if they had husbands. Kids were also hired. And you think you got it tough at your house, but kids as young as 5 were hired, especially in coal mines, because there were tunnels, and they would strap the coal things to their back and the pulleys and things, and they'd lean down and pull that coal thing through the chute and the small tunnels. they'd hit their heads often on the top of the tunnels, and that would cause them to go bald prematurely. So they were as young as 5 years old working in these coal tunnels. They didn't have a long life expectancy. Life was really hard for these people, or these kids. They also could be beaten, just like the women. It's much easier to beat a woman or a child than a man who might fight back or beat you up. So they did that too. And they were harassed in the same types of ways, abused in the same types of ways as women. Factory owners would also hire orphans. They would go to orphanages where children who didn't have parents would drop their kids off or whatever. The kids would end up working for these factories. And the factory owners loved it because they wouldn't have to pay the kids. They wouldn't have to pay the orphans. They would pay the orphanages a small fee, but the orphanages were happy to get rid of the kids for the day. You know, they didn't have to feed them or take care of them or anything. So the factory owners might give them lunch, but then work them 12, 14 hours. And they really were not paid for this. So orphans had it really, really rough. Not everybody was up with all this advancement in technology. A certain group was called the Luddites. And the Luddites protested against all this new machinery and technology. They didn't like the fact that these machines were taking jobs from everyday people, and especially from men. So they would protest. They'd go in to a factory and smash all the machines, or they'd protest in other ways. You know, they'd write articles and things like that. When they were caught, they were arrested and generally killed. You know, they could be beaten and killed or just arrested and eventually hanged. So the article that I asked you to read about the Luddites has something about a 12-year-old that you're going to find interesting. So these Luddites did not like technology. There are people just like that today. Labor unions, which you think would clean up a lot of this stuff, were illegal. They could not organize. Workers could not organize, and this caused a lot of problems. As you're going to see, whatever your take is on unions today, unions made a big difference in the world and stopped a lot of this bad stuff from happening. So we'll learn a little bit more about labor unions as we go on. And that's it for today. Make sure you get at least one thing done on your flipped unit today. I expect you all to be very good for the sub. Thank you.